Here we are. We're live. Hey, everybody. Larry Powell here, your host for Studio HFL, where you truly do hear from legends. See, I've already got my radio voice on, Ben.
Impressive.
Isn't that cool? So we're going to give everybody a chance to kind of log on here. The hundreds of thousands of people that are going to be here to witness Ben dig himself into a giant hole this evening.
It's
not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
I have skills. I've developed.
So we'll take care of a little bit of business here at the top here. This week on Studio HFL, of course, tonight, this is a live with interview with Ben Wright, second trumpet with the Boston Symphony Orchestra. Later this week is my second installment of the radio version of this program, and I chose Doc Severinsen, one of the several interviews I've had with Doc, and I've been able to pair that with quite a few tunes from the Tonight Show Band and some of his early albums. That's going to be Thursday night on WICR 88.7 FM, The Diamond, and that is 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Then Saturday is the release of my interview with Matthias Hofs, which is spectacular. What an amazing trumpet player. What an amazing musician. The next live with interview is going to be with that's March 23rd with Ronald Avis and Aaron Rahm, and that's I've never talked to all three of them at the same time, but they're all fantastic. It'll be a great interview with them. And then the last live interview of the month is March 28th, and that's a Sunday afternoon at 3 p.m. EST with Matilda Lloyd. And if you don't know anything about Matilda's solo career, it's skyrocketing. She's a spectacular musician. So one of the cool things here about Studio HFL is we're getting some really great sponsorship. And of course, you'll notice up here in the corner, find the right one right here, Chop Saver is generously sponsoring Studio HFL's Live With interview series. And Dan Gosling and I have been friends for, oh my gosh, let's see, since 1993. He was actually one of my teachers at Butler. Ben, he was.
Oh, okay.
Dan's a great guy. So I'm going to launch into my official radio voice here, so I can read this advertisement for Chop Saver. Chop Saver, the natural, organic, herbal lip care product created by professional trumpet player Dan Gosling. Created especially for the unique lip care needs of wind and brass musicians. Nothing soothes, heals, and protects sore, tired, chapped lips like Chop Saver. No tingle, not greasy, just makes your chops feel normal again, especially after a hard day of playing. Chop Saver is used and endorsed by some of the greatest names in the business, including Wayne Bergeron, Tom Hooton, Michael Sachs, Sir James Galway, Jay Friedman, and many more. Ben, do you use Chop Saver?
Sure.
We'll fix that.
Yeah.
Chop Saver is even recommended by dermatologists for their patients with chronic lip problems. So you know it's safe and effective, and it's a product anyone can use, musician or not. And for our Studio HFL listeners, use the coupon code HFL when you order at chopsaver.com to receive 20% off your next order. Hang on, I've got a slide to put up for that one.
Oh, yeah.
So let's see, is that the one I want? Here we are. So 20% off your next order at chopsaver.com. Use the coupon code HFL. And I don't know if there's a deadline on that, since this interview is going to live on in perpetuity, but I would say take advantage of that. Take advantage of that offer right away. So again, Dan Gosling, Chop Saver, thank you so much for your support of this podcast and for your friendship and support. Dan is one of my favorite go-to entrepreneurs. He is so savvy in this business, and I like not just working with him, but I'm going to show one other thing in here. This available today. Hey, I did a little photo shoot today. Isn't that ridiculous? That's somebody actually bought a shirt face.
That's a good look for you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
So let's see. We've got the distressed logo. That look right there, that pointing at the design, I picked that up from Rex Richardson.
Oh, okay.
That I'll have to credit him for that. This is my Sirius distant focus look.
I like it. Looks like a Sears catalog pose.
Yeah, I may have missed my calling.
Ooh, you model, definitely.
I don't know. Yeah, but they'll cut out the head and the hands, right? It'll just
that
be.
one. I like that shirt. I want one of those.
The long sleeve. That's what I'm wearing right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll talk. We'll
Yeah.
talk.
Good.
And this is the I'm not sure where I am look.
Got it.
I could wear that all the time. So my wife actually came up with this design. We will not be silenced. She's a screen printer, designer and screen printer. So she came up with that, and I was like, heck yeah, make a shirt out of that. So that's just a little funny montage there. So all of that is available at studioHFL.com/merch, MERCH. And gee, Ben, we're out of time. I thought we were going to have
This has
enough
been
time to
great.
actually
It's
talk
been
to you.
great talk. Yeah.
I feel enlightened, moved.
That's how people usually feel when they don't talk to me. Yeah.
So, so it might seem like we're old friends, and I do feel like I make friends pretty quickly. So for those watching, Ben and I actually just met. Well, we met by phone a couple of weeks ago to plan this, but then just 20 minutes or so ago, we actually looked face to face and greeted each other. So I'm thrilled to have you here. It's always fun to talk to really great musicians, and this is.
I was just looking.
Yeah. See, if it were somebody else, I said, it's always great talking to really great musicians. But tonight we have you.
Yes.
So,
tonight,
but
none of them were available. So,
but I'm not.
I'm
not going to say that.
Yeah.
So, the reason that you were on my radar for an interview is a mutual friend of ours, Melissa Williams, tuba player here in Indianapolis, and she said,
I believe my former babysitter. You have to double check with her on that.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, I hope she's watching. Melissa, if you're watching, write something in the comments.
She's definitely good friends with my parents. So longtime colleague of my dad's. Sorry, I interrupt. Go ahead.
No. Well, then, and that brings that around. The tie-in, of course, is you are from right here in the Midwest. You're from Indiana.
Evansville, Indiana.
Evansville, Indiana, which, if it were any further south, would be in Kentucky.
Yes, it is. It's in the armpit of Indiana.
I've never heard it referred to that way.
Well,
it's great.
It's right down there near. Wait, I have to leave this. There's Illinois and Kentucky. It's weird. It's like my image is flipped, so I'm backwards. Sorry.
It's better than being in another region of a body, right? I mean, an armpit could be a vast improvement. So, so obviously, well, I won't say obviously, because you mentioned Interlochen. I was going to say you went to high school down in Evansville, but
I was in Evansville until I finished my junior year. I went to Interlochen for the summer, and I literally couldn't imagine going home, which had nothing to do with my parents. It was the first time I'd been around serious musicians my age. So I stayed for my last year of high school. And that actually, I played that summer with Jim Markey in the World Youth Symphony Orchestra.
Oh, that's right. He mentioned that too. And he said, he was pointed right at the back of your head, I think he told me.
Well, that's what he does now. So he just got confused. I think we sat next to each other then.
Yeah. I'm going to interview him at some point. Seems like a super nice guy, even though he plays trombone, right? Yes. So you grew up here in Indiana, and I'm curious, at what point did you think, I'm pretty good. I think I want to take this seriously. Was there one or more experiences that kind of led you down that path?
Well, it's a little, I mean, my dad is an excellent musician, clarinetist. My uncle is an excellent trumpet player, Steve Wright, up in Minneapolis. My grandparents were musicians. My great-grandparents were musicians. My great-great-grandparents were musicians. It's kind of in my family, so I wasn't ever pushed that way. I mean, I started playing trumpet when I was 10. I think the first time I performed, the first time I could kind of play the trumpet and perform for people and like got that praise and that feedback, it was like a drug. And then, I was studying, my first teacher was Jim Burson, who was just a wonderful musician, the nicest man you ever met. I think he used to charge me $15 and a loaf of bread for a lesson. My mom got hip to the fact that he liked fresh bread, so she's not a baker, but she cooks some mean whole wheat bread. Anyway, so I studied with him for a while. Then when I was 15, it was around 13 or 14 when I know I wanted to play in an orchestra. I heard some recordings. I would go to hear the Evansville Philharmonic, and I wasn't really dialed into, first of all, how good that orchestra was then, but just the idea of a career as an orchestra musician, I didn't really know was there until I studied with Stan Curtis, who's at UC Fort Collins now, and I still remember where I was sitting in his studio the first time he played me he said, "I got this new recording of New York Philharmonic with Zubin Mehta playing Mahler 5," and I was like, "Oh, what's that?" And he puts it on. I was like, "Oh, that's what I want to do." So yeah, that was kind of it for me at that point.
It's funny that Mahler, for me, it was Al Hurt. It's funny, what that first experience is where you're kind of like, ooh, that's what I want to do. Right.
Right. Yeah.
So it was Phil Smith playing, right?
What's that?
Sorry, I was saying you did say that was Phil Smith, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Awesome recording.
Yeah. I'm going to skip ahead for just a second. I had this discussion with somebody recently. As trumpet players, we work on all these excerpts, right? Opening to Mahler 1 or Mahler 5, opening to Pines, Piccolo, Goldenberg Schmiel. But if you look at the percentage of those that actually get to play that repertoire, right? Yeah. And so my thought was, why do we work on all that? Why shouldn't we be working on all the John Williams and Jim Stevenson, all this other stuff that most of the orchestras are playing these days? But I understand it came around to the reason we do that, because that puts everybody on a level playing field for an audition, right? You have to show your mettle. Through those pieces.
It's interesting. Like, it seems like to me, there's two different kinds of audition lists. There's a reasonable audition list that covers all the basis of what you need to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like this audition list here, which was, this is the book that I made for the principal trumpet audition for the BSO back in 2006. And these are all complete pieces. There's
not just excerpts, right?
Yeah. So, just a little sampling: B minor Mass, Cantata, Christmas Oratorio, Concerto for Orchestra Bartok, Beethoven Symphony No. 8, Berg Chamber Concerto, like the whole thing. Like, and Peter Chapman, my very, very good friend and former colleague in the BSO, who's now doing what we should all do and living in Southern California. He made the list, and he just made it like that to scare people off, which is, I think, a little bit of an old school thing. But right. I get so tired of seeing these lists that have First Trumpet to Heldenleben, Alpine Symphony, like all this stuff is all redundant. It's like, can we hear you play a high C and make it sound easy? Okay, fine, check, right? Like, and then move on. But auditions are. I don't know. I don't know what to say about auditions.
Oh, I do.
Talk to Mark Gould about
auditions. I've done my fair share, and with a modicum of success. But so let's get back to you. Enough about me. What do you think about me?
It is an interview with me, so all I wanted to do was talk about myself. Yeah.
So, oh man, I want to skip all over, but let's go back and try to follow in order this. So you go to Interlochen. And you have a great experience there.
Mm-hmm.
Had you started auditioning or considered auditioning yet?
For professional groups?
Yeah.
No. I mean, I auditioned for BUTI, Boston University Tangold Institute, for Roger Voisin when I was a senior in high school, because he was still doing the tours.
Mm-hmm. Great picture. Yeah.
Yeah, that was in 1996.
You're the one on the left, right?
one of my favorite teachers, just so great. He said to me when I was a senior in high school, he said, you should audition for the fellowship orchestra. I was like, oh, what's that? And so I got to Cleveland, and I think Mike Sachs probably said, yeah, don't, you're not ready for that. Don't do that. So I didn't audition. I didn't go to Tangold until I was a junior. Anyway, but no, I wasn't taking professional auditions really until after I left Cleveland. Mike very, very, I think wisely discouraged me from taking professional auditions when I was in undergrad because I wasn't physically efficient enough. I could play almost anything for a short period of time and make it sound really good, but I just wasn't physically efficient. I didn't know how to do all that stuff until after I left school.
I would take an audition unsuccessfully. I'd come back and my wife would be like, oh, the stress that it puts her through. And I said, well, I lost, or, but I didn't advance or anything, but I improved something. I learned something, but it got to the point to where she's like, are you just taking another audition just so you can, improve something else? And I'm like, no, the intent is always to play well and advance and, win.
Yeah.
But you do improve something, right? I mean, all these auditions that you don't advance, you don't win. Do you still, did you feel that in the audition process that you were always moving ahead?
No. I often felt like I was crash landing an airplane.
Wow.
What I did learn between my first full-time orchestra audition, which Chris Karajev won in Cincinnati, good friend of mine in school. We hadn't really kept well in touch, but great guy. He's the assistant in Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
I went from Juilliard. I was in grad school at Juilliard. I flew to Cincinnati. I stayed with a friend, which was a mistake. Don't ever stay with a friend. Stay in a hotel. Spend the money. So I learned that. Not that this guy was perfectly nice. I just wasn't comfortable.
Sure.
Whatever. I played 3 excerpts, and right before I played the first excerpt, I was like, "Oh, bleep! Like, what am I doing here?" And I played 3 excerpts and played poorly, and they said thank you, and that was it. And sorry, my dog she's asleep and chasing squirrels or something. And so I learned that after my first audition. And then, I was really lucky. My second audition, which was for the Kennedy Center, I just went in and nailed it. I've never had a whole audition that I played. First of all, I never had a perfect audition. I never had a perfect round.
Mm-hmm.
The semifinals that I played at the Kennedy Center, I played out of my mind. Like, I just played better than I don't know. There's something about like the preparation that just drove me crazy because I was always just trying to figure out what have I not done? What have I not practiced enough? And my girlfriend at the time and my wife now, it was like a pressure cooker. Like, and then I get to the audition, I was just like, oh, thank God I can just play now. So yeah. So I guess there's certain. So then I'll tell you another thing I learned in an audition, which was when I auditioned for. So when I got to the Kennedy Center, I took a bunch of auditions, and generally I did well in them. I would advance, but the first really big one that I advanced in was Chicago. No, that's not true. Whatever. I advanced in Minnesota, which is a great orchestra, and whatever.
And with Chicago, you're not talking Civic. You're talking the CSO, right?
Right. So I was the Kennedy Center, so I had a job, and it was 4th trumpet in Chicago Symphony. And in order to take the audition, I had to actually lie to my personnel manager. I had to call in sick because they wouldn't let me off. Mm-hmm. So I called in sick. I went to Chicago. I took the prelim audition. I advanced, which was just, I was over the moon. But then, of course, it got back to the personnel manager via the bass trombone player in the Kennedy Center who didn't like me. Then I'd taken this audition, and I had to fall on the sword. And, it ended up being okay because he was a nice guy. He was actually really cool about it. A former trumpet player. And, but then I had to wait 5 months for the next round. And that whole time I'm just like going through the whole I'm not worthy, like, I can't believe I advanced, blah, blah, blah. And we were in the middle of like a Mozart opera cycle, which is like the worst. Second trumpet on a Mozart opera is the worst freaking thing to play for your chops ever. And But I got to Chicago, and I've been practicing way too much. And again, like I felt like I was crash landing an airplane, and my efficiency, I just didn't have it yet. And I played the rehearsal that afternoon with the accompanist, who was a very nice lady and not a good pianist. She couldn't follow me, and I sounded like crap. And I went out that night and learned my second lesson about auditions, which is that the night before audition, I have to drink at least 2 glasses of wine. I needed to just like chill. I needed to feel the world was okay if I didn't win this audition, and I did it the same way every other audition I ever won or took. And you know, it's not, I'm not endorsing drinking, but it just it was important for me to say, hey, you know what, my life is really great. You know, I've got this great at the time girlfriend. You know, I got friends, you know, I got things going on. It's like, it's not that important. It's right. Important. And that's the problem with these jobs, is that it's like winning the lottery. So it's hard not to think of it that way.
Here's a question I've not asked anybody yet, and I can't believe I haven't done this, but now your preparation for a weekly cycle with the BSO, does it look anything like, or even, you know, looking ahead at a season, does it look anything, does it resemble anything like prepping for an audition? Well,
I mean, it depends on what part of my time. I mean, I've been here for almost 19 years. I was in Chicago for 2 years before that. So, you know, it's, or no, not, wait, what is the year? 21 to, yeah, 19, almost 19, yeah. Wow. So, but both in Chicago and in Boston, I started in the summer season, and that's 8 weeks, 3 shows a week, different programs, 2 rehearsals per program. Mm-hmm. And that was overwhelming. But eventually, like maybe after 5 to 10 years, you're used to it. Like, and you know the repertoire, and you look ahead. And you see, okay, there's a new piece by Michael Gandolfi. Let me just take a look at that, you know. Or if it's Thomas Addis, you know, you have to take a look because that's really hard stuff. And then you know, it also depends on how good you are at reading. I'm a terrible sight reader. So
please tell me you're already tenured, right? We don't want anybody in the BSO hearing this and being like, wait a second.
I've been tenured. I moved to second trumpet in 2011, and I got tenured that year. So no, I'm good.
Yeah. I am fortunate. I have 4 small regional groups that I play with here in Indiana and one down in Kentucky. And I'm principal with each of those groups. I like the pressure of that job, but I think the hardest job is the second trumpet. And much respect goes to...
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. And, you know, of course, I just released Rolf's interview last week, and what a great interview. I forgot just how funny, how droll he can be.
Yeah.
It was terrific. And so there's a plug for Tom Rolf's interview. But no, I've known this for years and years. The quality, not just playing, but the quality of personality of that person sitting next to you is so important. And of course, Rolf's, you know, he spoke about the support that he's got with the section in Boston. But that's something I find really difficult. If I ever have to go and sit and play second somewhere, I'm like, kill me now. This is a hard job.
Yeah.
And you know, because I'm not in control. I have to follow somebody else.
Yeah. Well, so, you know, if you have to follow somebody like Tom Rolfs, who's like a freak and can play anything, and is incredibly consistent. Like, I mean, I'll look at him in concerts and go, how do we do that? He's like, what do you mean? Right? I was like, how do we release that note together? There's no idea. Like, you know, the conductor will go like this, and then the freaking woodwinds will hold it for like another beat or 2 beats. I love my woodwind colleagues, but they just keep holding. So it's like, you know, like, da, you know, it's like, okay, now it's like the radar, you know, and it's just so easy with Tom. It's just like, you know, I played with him since 2002. He was assistant principal then when I was 4th, and then We had a few years when he moved up to principal and his old associate principal job was open. I was playing acting associate. And then I moved into the second chair. So it was just like, we were back, back playing together. So,
Yeah.
I mean, second playing is really, and then when I move up and play principal occasionally, it takes me, especially if it's in pops, because that's a real jarring kind of thing. It's not my strength. But it's good. I like the challenge of it. And then I do like when I'm playing principal, I do like the ideas that I can take what I'm listening and just know that's where I'm going to go. And understandably, when you're playing principal, if something happens and you get either distracted or somebody does something weird or the conductor something weird, you got to come in where you think it's right. And then the second player just comes in, so, I mean, I definitely hit a wall with my playing 2014, end of 2014. I finished our pops run, and I looked at Miriam when I got home, and I was like, my wife, I was like, I don't think I can keep going like this. Like, I can't.
What was it?
I think it was a lot of stuff. I mean, I think a lot of, for me, was probably being a little too sensitive to whatever was going on around me, and just coming in hell or high water in the right place always, and the pitch was always right, no matter what I was getting. Which, as I said, is always at a very high level. But like, I wasn't breathing right. Like, I never really learned anything about breathing. Like, I knew nothing about Jacobs until about 4 years ago. And I remember, like, it was in 2015. I went to Ralph's with a breath builder, the tube with the ping pong ball. And I said, how do you use this thing? Nobody ever showed me how to use one of these things. Like, and it's not, I had great teachers. There's nothing wrong with them. We just worked on other stuff. He said, well, so you want to keep the ball at the top through your inhale or whatever he said, something like, he was like, what's wrong with you? Why don't you, because we're good friends, And I did it, and on the inhale, somehow I sucked my stomach in on the inhale instead of like just, fanning the lungs out. Like he's like, how did you do that? I was like, do what? What did I do? He said, that was exactly backwards. I was like, I have no idea. So it was like, it kind of started me down like a journey. It was right when we switched to Yamaha, and I'd been playing a Mount Vernon. So I switched mouthpieces, trumpets, and I don't know, physical fundamental styles, like, all at once. And I remember that summer we were playing a tour, Mahler 6, which is one of the hardest second trumpet parts ever written, and then also Don Quixote, which is a great second trumpet part. And we were playing Salzburg and the Proms and all these, Vienna. It's very high pressure. I kind of wish that I'd just taken some time off to figure it out, but I didn't really figure it out until about a year ago. It took me forever. Just,
So what was the catalyst? What was the trigger? I mean, that you said I finally got it figured out. Was it just getting that process?
Like I mean, for years, like I would hear Rolf say stuff like, "Oh, I'm not using my air." I'm like, yeah, whatever. I don't know. And we teach these classes at Tanglewood, and he would talk to them about moving their air, and I was like, you know what? Can you just do that with me? Because I had no idea. Like, I just no idea. Like, there were times clearly when I was doing it right, and then other times, but my consistency was not what it should have been. And it stressed me out all the time. And I'm sitting next to, like, the juggernaut trumpet player of all time. It's like trying to keep up with him was difficult. It's difficult for a really good player. And I was, so yeah, so no, I think it just came, and actually the last piece for me was Alexander Technique. Alexander Technique was huge for me. So my wife had started she's now, she's like one semester off from being a certified teacher.
Uh-huh.
Fantastic cellist, but also an Alexander technique teacher. She recommended I go see Debbie Adams, who runs the program at Berkeley and Boston Conservatory. And I'll never forget the first session. I walked in there and I had a Shostakovich, one of the banger symphonies, like a double recording session. And I said, yeah, play. She said, fine. So she worked with me, for like 15 minutes. I said, well, maybe I'll play. And so she did a couple of things and I started playing. And what I couldn't believe was how much better my lips felt because of the stress and the tension in the rest of my body that I was alleviating. She said, well, why are you sucking your stomach in all the time? I said, oh, well, I had a back injury 10 years ago. She didn't say it like that because she's like, she's very gentle. And I said, well, I had back injury. She said, well, so I have to suck in my stomach to protect my lower back. She said, oh, how is your lower back now? Is it better? And I said, yeah. She said, so do you think that habit is still serving you? So that has been like, and Mark Gould, the first thing he said to me when I studied with him, he said, you have to become your own teacher. And that's my goal for all of my students, is to give them the tools that they need to teach themselves how to play the trumpet. So, you lay out all your tools and you figure out, okay, this is what I learned from this guy or this teacher or this woman or whatever. Like, I can still remember something I learned from Kimberly Wright, who was a horn player in the Chicago Symphony and then San Francisco Symphony. I think she's retired now. She's not old, but I think she's retired. But I still remember something I learned in a master class from her in 1995, something like that. It's like, you just lay all that stuff out and you're like, okay, well, is this still working for me? Mark Gould said to me as a student, he says, Benny, the back pressure for a high C is the same as a C in the staff. And I was like, okay, cool. So I went back to my practice room, went back to my apartment, and I'm looking at my notes going, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean? I never figured it out. I spent years months trying to figure it out. And then I set it aside. And then he came and did a class here at New England. And he said the same thing. I'm like, man, I never figured that out. Last spring, I'm in a lesson with a student, and I'm telling him this story about how I never figured it out. I was like, oh my God, I just figured it out. And it's just semantics. Because for me, I would say that the air pressure on lower notes needs to be higher so that when you go to higher notes, it doesn't feel so different. But I could be like, so now I can do that where I feel like I play like a C in the staff with enough air pressure that when I go to a high C,
right,
it doesn't feel that different. But you know what I mean? Like, I just had no freaking idea what it meant.
But I mean, I look at all this stuff like if we were to make it through our careers without any stumbles, without any trials, tribulations, however you want to phrase it, right? Especially if we're going to be a teacher, how effective are we going to be, right? When we have to suffer all this stuff ourselves, right? All of a sudden, we become
honestly,
that much more empathetic with a student, right?
Yeah, and it's ironic because like when my kids were, so I started playing second trumpet when I won the audition for second trumpet when my kids were, I have twin boys. They were 4 months old, 5 months old. So I was like half asleep for that. I mean, I just, that was an interesting process. That was the audition that I prepared for the least in my life, because as you get further on in the cycles and you learn how the music goes, it's just about getting in shape. So it wasn't like I needed to learn the excerpts. I'd been playing them for years.
Right.
It was a matter of just getting in shape. And I'm glad I was in shape, because we have a finals A and then a finals B here. And so for finals A, to which I was invited because I'm already a member of the orchestra, it was a 25-minute round. And we played the longest section from Mahler to Grosse Appel up to the high C, and then the last page of Bartok and Sheriff Orchestra, and the whole last page. It was rigorous. And then, so I finished that, and then went downstairs. And then I guess Levine hadn't been at the other rounds. And they didn't know who was playing because it was behind a screen. So we want to hear, the maestro wants to hear this one player play Mahler 4. So I waited for a half an hour, and then I went out and played the second trumpet lick from the first page in Mahler 4. And then I went downstairs, and then I came out for like 20 minutes of, maybe an hour and a half later, I came back for 20 minutes of section playing, and that was it. And I don't know what the point was of this whole thing. I just started just talking about myself.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go.
Well,
bring it back, Larry. Bring us back on point.
So at what point? Actually, I've been listening this whole time.
Oh! This is the point.
Okay, good.
I remember.
Good.
Okay. So I said, so I finished Christmas Pops 2 years after my kids were born. Again, it's always after Christmas Pops because it's like it's like 3 shows a day for like 3 weeks, and it's both mind numbing and physically very fatiguing. I said to Mira, was like, I can't. I was about 20 pounds heavier than I am now. I was not in good shape. And so starting then, I got like in really good physical shape, like I working out and exercising, yoga, like all this stuff became sort of like a part of my life. But when I really hit the wall with my trumpet playing a few years later, I was in the best physical shape I've been in my life. But it was right around 40, and I sort of learned from a lot of my colleagues that a lot of them went through the same thing. It's like sometimes the physiology changes. Like, who knows? Who knows what happened?
Well, it's interesting you say that, and not to shift too much to me, but you could see this actually if you go and watch my interview with Rolfs on the YouTube channel. You'll see what I looked like when I interviewed him. 170 pounds heavier.
How long ago was that?
That was the end of July. So 7 months. And we can talk about this. I can't edit this. I can after the fact, but bariatric surgery. But
Okay.
I'm 5 pounds away from being exactly half what I was.
Oh my God.
The middle of last year. So
that must feel amazing. Congratulations.
Yes, thank you very much. But my chops went to crap. And so actually Wayne and Bobby Shue and Pickett, I mean, I've reached out to some great people who were extremely helpful. But yeah, the whole physiology thing changes. Age, the way even your perception, right, can change everything. Because you even talked about not having to prep auditions the same once you'd played the repertoire, right? Your perception changes. So many things can change, but all valuable experiences. I'll bring it back to that. If I hadn't gone through what I'm going through right now, I think this is going to make me a better teacher in the long run, because I'm going to have some other student come in and I'll be like, well, I don't know. I can be, let me tell you, here's what you should expect, and here's how you're going to get through it.
Yeah.
So we'll take a little bit of a left turn. I want to come back to your comment earlier about how Mozart second trumpet is destructive to your chops, because I found that a really interesting comment. But I want to talk about studying with Mark Gould. And and this is not a plug for his book, even though I'm going to have Mark on next month and we'll talk about it. But even reading just the first few pages out of this, what he said is exactly what you said a few minutes ago, is he was teaching you how to do things yourself, how to teach yourself. Yeah. But what does that look like with him?
I can't speak to before I was at Juilliard, because I know he likes to push people's buttons, but he knew, he could see that was not gonna be good for me. Fast forward a few years later when I was denied tenure in Chicago, he was the first person. He never calls anybody back. He called me back like 30 seconds later. Like he was like there for me, like in a way that at the time was so crucial. It was so amazing. But no, I think there was a student there at the same time as me, really great trumpet player, close friend of mine. He was going through like a terrible breakup with his girlfriend, and so he and Mark would smoke weed during his lessons, because he just was like, that was what he needed.
Is he taking students right now? I'm just curious. Just kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah. No, and he knew that what I needed, I mean, it's funny. I remember somebody very incorrectly saying, if you have problems, then you should not go study with Mark Gould. He's all about music, blah blah blah. I was like, oh, okay, great. Somebody who is a very good trumpet player and had studied at Juilliard, and they just were wrong because Mark, I went to him and I said, look, I've got this low set, a middle set, and a high set, and I can't bridge them. I'm as flexible as a cinder block. I need, so I just worked on that with him. And I also was such a perfectionist and so locked into trying to play something just so exactly instead of just like feeling it. He had me walking down the street in New York singing Leonore 3, dun 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 dun, just like belting it out. And of course, nobody was looking at me because it was New York in the
Right.
90s. That was, people just expected it to be odd. But yeah, it was huge. It was he was exactly what I needed. I mean, I didn't even apply to other schools. That was the only school I applied to.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's skip back a little bit. Chicago. Can we talk about Chicago?
Sure, it's a city in Illinois.
Should we leave it there?
No, it's good. No, you can ask me whatever you want.
So was this
there are many nice people that I like in Chicago.
The audition that you took, was that the one that Taga followed you? Is that right?
Right.
Okay.
So when I was denied tenure in December of 2001, and in February of 2002, I got this job in Boston. And then Taga won the audition the next time they had the audition.
Did you enjoy your time in Chicago?
Were
you allowed to enjoy your time in Chicago?
No. I mean, it was unpleasant. It was unpleasant. I mean, it was really cool to work with Bud Herseth. I worked with Bud for 1 year, his last year. He was a character in the extreme. He was very nice to me. And that was great. And then Craig Morris came in during my second year.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a big transitional time, and I didn't do well there was a lot of negativity coming my way, and I did not flourish in that environment. I just was too sensitive for it. So,
well, and I think people will understand what we're talking about, and we can leave all that right there. I don't want to drag anybody into it. It's just
I wouldn't disparage anybody. I mean, it's just people have different ways of communicating, and I always think people do better if you communicate in a positive way, and how can I help you in this situation instead of being kind of heavy-handed. And some of my closest, I mean, I'm still very close friends with the first guy I met the very first day at Ravinia, a cellist named Brant Taylor, one of my closest friends. Lots of friends in Chicago. I'm so glad I don't play in that brass section. I think it's really different now than when I was there. And it would have been fun to play with Chris Martin, but I love where I work now. I love the brass players I play with. I love playing with Tom. I love my trumpet section. I'm so lucky.
It's interesting too to look at. I mean, it's like Tom Rolfs and then 3 pups, right? I mean, just look at the age difference, right? And I don't know who's the youngest in that group. If it's Tom Siders or
so the kids in the group are 10 years younger than me. So I'm in the middle.
Well, you still look like a kid.
Thank you. I'll take it.
But what I gathered from Tom, of course, and from you, is that the vibe there is really cool, really special.
Yeah, I mean, we respect each other and treat each other like adults, and we care about each other.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when Mike Martin and his wife had their daughter Cassie, who's a beautiful, I think 6 or 7 year old girl now, 6 or 7, 6 I think. She came really early, like really early. Like she arrived early, and I remember Tom just kind of taking Mike aside and going, look, I know you want to go on this tour, but I think even though the due date is just like, you need to be, and it was just so great. Like, just, it's great to see. It's just it's a good situation. Nice people. So.
Tell me a little bit about this virtual seminar.
Yeah. So like last spring, when everything was sort of blowing up, so almost exactly a year ago, I called Dave Krause, who's a friend of mine. And Dave is principal trumpet in the Metropolitan Opera, and you should get him on for one of these things. He's very funny.
I interviewed him. He was terrific. He was another person who I would never guess would have the kind of humor. But it was terrific.
Yeah, no, he's brutal. So I called him and I said, hey, because we teach together at BUTI, and our wives teach together at Berkshire Summer Music, which is a summer music festival that he and his wife started. His wife is a fantastic violinist and teacher. So they started this thing, and I said, hey, BUTI is not going to happen this summer. There's no way. We got to make sure that there's something for the kids to do. So, and nobody was doing, nobody wanted to do online lessons. Nobody wanted to do. So what I learned pretty quickly was that with a decent microphone, and I'm just using an Apogee mic here.
Right.
I don't even have a preamp or a mixer or whatever. Like, I just plug it into my MacBook Pro, and I did some tests and kind of figured out, you know what, that sounds like me in this room, not in a concert hall, but like when I really think about like what was important to me learning as a student in school, yes, going to hear Mike Sachs play in the Cleveland Orchestra is huge. Even more important, sitting right next to him, listening to him play this kind of a space. That's the real sound. Like, that's the truth, right? Because what we do on stage is not what you hear in the hall.
Right.
It's much more compact. So that was kind of where it started, and we put together a thing. It was a 2-week festival. We did 1 week of high school, 1 week of college, and I mean, at the same time, there were other people doing that started. Tom Hooten's doing a lot now. Some people really embrace it, and some people I think it's really disconcerting. Just the screen and whatever. Like, I get it. Like, it's not for everybody. But what I'm doing a seminar right now with 6 students who would not be able to study with anybody right now if it wasn't for this interface. Right. And all the things, like, I can make a recording in this room, store it on my computer, and share it with them. Either so I can, hey, check this out. Let's work on this for next week. It's just using the technology and saving them money. Let's talk about saving students money, right? Because it's not like I'm not giving away these seminars. It costs money, right?
Right.
But like, the seminar that my students are in right now, they get 12 lessons, 12 studio classes, almost the same number of trumpet chats, where we're kind of like this, where last week I had Taga Larson in. And then I do a thing called practice window coaching, where they record 5 minutes of their practice, and together we watch it and go through it. Be like, oh, well, this thing you're doing here, that's great. Do more of that. This other thing, this doesn't make as much sense. It's not so efficient. Try this instead. And I thought it would work, and it's really working. So it's really cool. But it's like a semester in conservatory minus the ensembles. Now, obviously, ensembles are a big deal. But like for me, like when I went to Juilliard, I got nothing from Juilliard. I got Mark Gould because that was the only way I could get Mark Gould, was if I went to Juilliard, and I paid the equivalent at Juilliard of like, what if I paid $60,000 right now? What are you gonna get a master's degree for $60,000 a year? It's crazy.
Okay, so we talked about that briefly right before we went live. Do you want to expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's like you were saying, like, students are expected to pay big money for degrees as a musician. Well, if I look at like, the Matt Muckeys, Mike Martins, Ethan Bensdorfs, Tom Siders, myself, all these people that won jobs right either at the end of their undergrad or at the very beginning of their graduate school. It's like, well, okay, that's one thing. But the reality is it's not like that for everybody, right? So, and then what I see is like, I see students who apply to NEC who are really good players who might be slightly down in the pecking order, and then they get no money, right? So then they have this choice of like, the choice shouldn't be, either go to Rice or Curtis or, Juilliard is also fond of giving full rides now, not when I was in school, but
Of course not.
it shouldn't be that or pay 50K or even 25K for God's sake. Like, like I've got this student right now who's a great student. He took the year off after studying at Montclair State University. He took the year off, and he's waiting tables and taking lessons, and he's getting better.
Okay, so this is going to be to your point there. I've got a couple of students who love to do drum corps, and I've got a drum corps background, but back in the day where it didn't cost, $5,000 for the summer.
Oh, does
So
yeah.
yeah, I mean it's expensive, hugely expensive. But compare that to paying for grad school. If you're going to go for performance, don't you think it'd be better just to take that money and study independently with as many people? I mean, you're not going to have the paper, the diploma, but aren't you going to have a better experience?
It really depends on what you need, right? So, I mean, want. I mean, look, I wouldn't have done well in the job if I hadn't gone to Cleveland and played with really good people in school and like learned how to play well in an ensemble. And I think if that's what you're going to do, you do have to at some point learn that, right? So like one of the things I'm trying to develop is a tool where like I play through like Heldenleben with a click, right? So I do the second part because they come in first, we come in first, which now I realize is like much easier than doing that. So play the and then I send them the other two parts, and it's all synced, and then they just plug themselves in the middle. So there are ways to use the technology to start to develop that a little bit. But I mean, at some point you got to get ensemble experience, right? If you want to play in an ensemble. But I don't think that means you have to, spend an arm and a leg. I mean,
It's too bad you can't really pick and choose, right? And say, okay, I'm just going to take private lessons and play in the school orchestra. They're going to say, no, we'd reserve that for full-time students. I mean, and I get that,
Well, but you know what? I mean, demand is going to drive it. So like, I'm so curious to see what happens after this year when students have taken time off. And what I'm seeing with the students that are taking time off is they're getting a lot better. And they're not playing in ensembles. So, I mean, you talked about like what people have to play on auditions and whether you even ever play those things. I mean, violinists learn to play There's just an article in the Rolling Stone yesterday about this very thing. What are people learning? Well, I'm trying to cover as many bases as I can for classical trumpet, which is, it's not a broad spectrum.
right?
But mainly, I just want students to get better and to learn how to teach themselves, because then it's just going to give them more options down the road.
Do you find yourself teaching in the style of Mark Gould or Ben's style?
I have to admit, well, no, I mean, I had a lot of great teachers. I mean, I think certainly the way I learned from him was incredibly impactful. But I studied with Mike Sachs for 4 years. Roger Voisin was a huge influence for me. And I only studied with him. I studied with him for 2 summers at Tanglewood, and then my first summer after I got tenure here, I forced him to every week I would come over. I would bring a bottle of wine and lunch, and he would eat the food and drink the wine, and I would play Charlier and Biche for him. So it felt like I kind of learned how to play that stuff from,
right. Right.
from the horse's mouth. Chris Gecker was huge.
Oh.
So like, and like I talked to Chris 2 years ago. I did a class in Maryland, and he said something about this guy Rich Willie, his focal point book.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything that Chris talks to me about, I bought whatever he said he was talking about,
Mm-hmm.
and I got it and I looked at it and was like, yeah, this isn't going to work for me. I tried it, the idea, but the book is like just basically like wherever you start in the day is like where you tend to be focused with your chops. Well, I play second trumpet for 21 years, 23 years now. I'm focused low, and I've always wanted to have the option to, play Mahler 6, the second trumpet part, and get up to the high C sharp at the beginning of the last movement and not feel like it was like just death. And, I could always play it, but it never felt all that easy. And so, actually just a month and a half ago, I went back to the book and I was like, I'm going to try this again. And I think that's a lot of it is things change. So like now, my focal point is higher, and interestingly enough, like a lot of the stuff I'm practicing and I'm just working on just rep and just like getting better and applying all the stuff that I've learned in the last 5 years. I'm having a really good time. It's like just playing all the time.
So I don't want to forget asking about Mozart second trumpet.
Yes. Part of the reason why it was awful for my playing was that when I played soft, I didn't use my motor. I would just go like, I took in like this much air, and, I remember when I was in the middle of, as I call it, my wandering in the desert phase 5 or 6 years ago. And I went to see Gould. It was in New York City. We were playing at Carnegie or something. I went to see Gould, and I was like, man, why didn't you tell me about he's like, yeah. I was like, but you never told me that. It's like, same thing, like playing a soft note. I'd just be like just trying to squeeze it out, and then realizing, oh, well, there has to be air pressure behind that note too. It's just a smaller ribbon of air, Anyway,
so it's not the difficulty of Mozart itself. It was just the situation it put you in. And
I mean, funny enough, Chris Gecker was playing first trumpet on that run. But no, I think I think it's still not great for your chops because it's just like low and soft all the time, unless you're playing loud and high when you practice at home. It's just there's no balance to it.
What I've learned over the years is playing the big stuff is great. Beethoven is some of my favorite to play. And some of my students are like, "What? It's just the same thing over and over again." I said, "Yeah, but there's a great challenge in Go ahead.
Sorry, there's a great challenge. Go ahead.
Oh no, and playing, and being so consistent and shaping it. They're not exactly the same. It depends on what the strings are doing. And sometimes you're a glorified timpani, sometimes you're the leading voice, right? It's you got to know what's going on. There's a huge challenge there.
I will say that when I have to play a run, or when I'm lucky enough to play a run of Beethoven 5, my face always feels like garbage afterwards, because there's so many places where second trumpet is lower than principal trombone. And Toby Oft, our principal trombone, is fantastic. But, I'm going da 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 da, and he's like da, 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 da. He's like an octave higher. So doing that kind of playing for a week, it's just, again, there's no balance because it's kind of one flavor. But playing first on Beethoven symphonies is great. But yeah.
Is there a repertoire out there you haven't done yet you'd like to get your chops onto?
For the orchestra, I wish we'd do more Thomas Otis. I wish we'd do John Corigliano. I wish we did more new music. Yeah.
Is the BSO geared for that?
It's very traditional. Very traditional. And I mean, it's tricky because your audience base really want the war horses, but you can put. I mean, what was like we did Goodbye to Lena. I love her music. We did the Goodbye to Lena violin concerto, which is such a powerful piece of music. We did it once. It's like Why don't we do this on a tour? Instead we take Beethoven Violin Concerto on a tour. Like, really? We need another performance of the Beethoven Violin Concerto.
I really wonder if this pandemic is going to change the what's the word? The demographics, right? I mean, is that older generation going to be comfortable coming back into the concert hall? I mean, you're going to have to. Every orchestra is going to have to reach out to, if they haven't already, a very different looking.
Well, yeah, because then there's all this stuff that happened around race and you know, gender equality, and I mean, there's just all kinds of stuff that has happened in the last year. And we started. We're going to have diversity fellowships. With the BSO, kind of, I think modeled somewhat off of Detroit Symphony.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's an interesting
time. Judith Saxton, do you know Judith?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Of course, I interviewed her just following George Floyd's murder, and she was very moved. Another Alexander person, before I forget, of course, but had written a piece based on those events. I mean, and of course, out of tragedy is born great art, right? I mean, there's going to be so much, I think, that's going to come. I hesitate to say the word good, but I think a lot of very powerful stuff is going to come out of all this.
Yeah.
That's going to reflect and maybe move us forward. But
yeah.
So let's see. I think we cover everything. We didn't throw anybody under the bus. Yeah.
I don't think. Which I'm just gonna. Yeah.
I tell you what, I love getting to talk to people like you, so willing to share. And I'm thinking I need to study with you. I'm going to have to connect with you and take some online lessons and see if I can't up my game as well. Right.
Yeah. I mean, sorry, that was the best I could come up with a name.
Are you kidding me? It's like WTF, right? I mean, you got to. That's going to stick. Up your game.
Yeah.
Or is it up your game or up your playing?
Up your game.
Up your game.
You too could be one of the tens of people that go to my website.
Yeah. Well, man, this has been a treat. Get to know you a little bit, and
it's nice to meet you and chat with you as well.
Thank you. I'm going to wrap up, so don't disappear. I'll sign off here, and then we'll close offline here. So everybody, thank you for joining in tonight. Appreciate having Ben Wright, second trumpet of the Boston Symphony Orchestra, here with us. And just a reminder that the next Live With interview is March 23rd with the Rom Trio, and then March 28th is Matilda Lloyd. So check out the website for that. And of course, again, thanks to Chop Saver for their generous sponsorship of this Live With series. And let me do a very quick spiel. Of course, Chop Saver, the natural, organic, herbal lip care product created by professional trumpet player Dan Gosling. And if you haven't used Chop Saver yet, here's your opportunity to go to the website, chopsaver.com, use the code HFL, and you can get 20% off of your order. So again, chopsaver.com, 20% off with HFL here from Legends. So again, Ben, thanks for joining us tonight. Everybody else, thank you, and hopefully see it. Hey, I'm going to shout out to a couple of friends of mine here. Sean Jones, another trumpet player friend of mine, long time. We went to college together. Says good interview. Rosemary Klein, a local trumpet player here in Indy, terrific supporter of music and becoming a good friend. I keep meeting her at all these trumpet conferences, so it's nice to have them aboard. So again, everybody, thank you, and I'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.